I actually was originally not planning on reading this, but we decided on this one as our read-along in my Patreon, and I really enjoyed it. It is not perfect, but as a very well-paced standalone fantasy, kind of into sci-fi a little bit, it's really different from a lot of the books I've been reading lately. And not just different as in different is better than better, but it was different and well done. This book is by M L Wang, same author as The Sword of Kaigen. I would say that the writing style you can tell is by the same author, but it's different enough from The Sword of Kaigen that they're not necessarily for the same audience. So if you like this one, you're not going to automatically like The Sword of Kaigen and vice versa. This story takes place in the city of Tyren that has put in place a magical dome over the city to protect the city from the outside wildness, the cold winters, and the magical nasty thing that eats people up called the Blight. Outside of the city of Tyren is like the wilderness, and people out there are dying from the blight, from starvation, until more and more groups of people who live outside of the city in a desperate need just to survive, can't survive outside anymore, have to try to get to Tyren. And so the book starts with not the main character. The main character is Siona. We start with a character named Thommel, which I think I'm saying that right based on how he describes the pronunciation of his name to Siona later. He and his entire village have to run across the ice to try to make it through the magical shield dome into the city of Tyren. It is their people's last hope of survival, just to try to get there. That's one of the things I wanted to mention about this book. The main character is Siona, but it doesn't start with her. Chapter 1 is Thommel and his people. And once I read it and then went to the actual main character, it really felt like that first chapter was supposed to be the prologue. And Wang just called it Chapter 1 so that people wouldn't skip it. Because apparently some people like to skip prologues, and this is not one that you can skip. Thommel's story to start matters for the rest of the story, clear through to the end. And if by my saying that chapter 1 is like a prologue and you're like, oh, I guess I can skip it, don't skip chapter 1. Thommel and his people are known as the Quen. So once you get into the city of Tyren, the divide between the Quen and the Tyrens is huge. This book is full of themes of sexism, racism, classism, and it is not subtle. It's like M L Wang just wanted to shine this bright light on all of those issues and make it so you cannot ignore that these things are issues. The story has huge problems of inequality. And really, really frustratingly, we have the main character, Siona, who is a female mage. And in Tyren, part of the sexism of the world building is that all the high mages and archmages are male. They don't let women in. Any mage who progresses to the point where they are able to take the test to try to become a high mage has to be approved by the other high mages and archmages, and they just don't approve women. So Siona has to be so much better than any man before her. She has to earn her spot more than anybody else. Usually a woman practicing magic is thought perfectly acceptable to become a teacher and teach children magic, but not to actually become a high mage herself. And Siona experiences a lot of sexism in her profession, like the really, really mean, nasty kind. All that to say, leading up to the type of person that Siona is, she is not a likable character. One of those reasons being that all of the sexism she experiences, she behaves the same way to the Quen. And it's like she doesn't even realize that the way that the men at the university treat her is how she treats the Quen. And it's so frustrating to see. It's like, come on, do you even see what you're doing here? In our read-along, I don't think anybody really liked Siona as a character. And I don't think a main character has to be likable. They just have to serve the purpose of the story. And her purpose is to really point out what kind of person strives to become a powerful mage. She's kind of an example of people who seek power. And the really interesting and compelling character is Thommel from the beginning. So if you read that first chapter and then go into chapter 2 and now it's Sayona, and you're like, well, where'd Tamil go? I liked him. You will probably continue to like him. He's a good character. Very well done. One of the things that I thought was interesting, this is not a very long book in the realm of like fantasy books. It's like 400 pages, but in a big epic fantasy, there is time for subtle world building and explaining the magic and how things work just through the storytelling. As the characters experience stuff, the readers get to learn how things work in the world. This one, without the big epic scale, without the extra page numbers, Wang uses a couple of little tricks to explain things to us. One of those being that Sayona has a cousin who comes with her at the beginning, and the cousin doesn't know anything about magic. And she doesn't know that much about how the politics in Tyron City work. And so Sayona is able to explain things to her, which is like the vessel or the lens through which we get to understand how things work here. And then again later, as she explains things to her Quen assistant, it's the same kind of thing. They are talking about magic and Sayona is explaining it, so then we get to understand more. And the magic is kind of complicated, a little bit on the mechanical side. I liked it. I've watched Sanderson's lectures on building magic systems for fantasy, and I think he would approve of how the system is put together. There's very strict rules. There's a very certain way to do the magic that you can go to school and study and learn the rules. It really starts to go more into science, and the magic is like a science, and the mages feel a lot more like scientists who are studying how magic works and how to apply it and use it in the real world. And one of the things that makes the magic so interesting is how different it is and the device that they use. They use a spellograph, which is like an old style typewriter, but with this magical screen, and they have to type in coordinates to source magic from the other realm, the garden of bounty that God has blessed them with. They can pull that in, typing up a spell as they go, to then use basically the same way as electricity. So they have lights and trains and vehicles, and things are a little more modern than you expect in a normal fantasy book. It really feels like it kind of balances between fantasy and sci-fi, which I like. I think that's cool. If you hear from anyone that this book is supposedly a romance, or if anyone dares to call it romantasy, no. There is a relationship in this story that has barriers to overcome. A couple of people who have to learn how to work together and get along. They learn to respect each other. But I appreciated that there was not a main romance plot line. The plot follows Sayona on her journey for power in the university, trying to prove herself. One of the things that they are trying to do is expand the dome. The magical dome that protects their city basically puts a cap on the population. And as the population expands, they need some physical expansion. She is chosen as one of the mages to create a proposal on how to expand that barrier. Through that research, she uncovers something interesting. There is at least one good plot twist, which I called. I never guess plot twists, so I was really happy that I had called it. That never happens for me. And speaking of the plot twist, something I was curious about in this book after having read the Sword of Kaigen is in the Sword of Kaigen, one of the big main things happens in the middle, and then there's a lot of the book left after that. It's like, what do the characters do now that the big thing has happened? That didn't really happen here, but there is a plot twist sooner than you maybe expect. And so that's not what the story is about. It's more like, what do they do now that they have figured this thing out? Which I actually kind of like. Rather than making the reader wait until closer to the end to discover the plot twist, we get it early and then see what the characters do with that information. And then there is no spice. I was going to mention that when I said it's not really a romance. I know there are readers who would like to purposefully avoid spice in books. This one does not have it. Also, interestingly, this book has a lot of characters just talking. There's a lot of like philosophical and religious debate, a lot of talking about how the magic works, the characters discussing the magic system, but I never felt like it was dragging. And despite all the scenes of talking, it still felt like the pacing was good, and it always felt like something was happening. It always felt like the plot was moving forward, or the character development was moving forward. And the fact that the magic is kind of complicated, the magic system is an integral part of the plot, which I also really like. I'm actually okay with, in a fantasy book, there just being magic that's part of the world and people can use it, but it's not necessarily the point of the story. In this one, the magic matters. So early in the book, when there's lots of like explanations on what they're doing, if you're tempted to skim, at least take enough time that you feel like you have an understanding of how the magic works, so later when it comes into the plot and it matters, you're not lost and you know what's going on. That would be my advice. I felt a little bad for the read along with my patrons. My intention was to take the whole month to read it, and I tried really hard at first. I read the first little bit pretty slow, and then at one point I just couldn't put it down. And to me, that was really refreshing, because I've had a few books recently where I felt like I was forcing myself to finish, and I did not feel that way with this one. Every time I put it down, I looked forward to picking it back up and keeping going and finding out what happened next. One of the things that I thought was not her strong point in this one, or Sword of Kaigen, is the dialogue. It wasn't bad. I could just tell that it is not her strong point, and that's fine. And then the ending was very emotional. The ending pulled me in. I was not sure how it would end. If you are reading this after the Sword of Kaigen and you know what kind of choices M L Wang is willing to make, you might feel a little stressed towards the end, like what's going to happen? That's kind of how I felt. I do think she made mostly the right choices for how to end it, and especially the way the last chapter wraps things up, for the most part, I thought was very well done. Overall, I didn't think it was as amazing as some people are saying it is, but definitely an enjoyable read that I would recommend. I will put a link for this one, and actually Sword of Kaigen too, if you haven't read that yet and you're wanting to get into this author more. I'll put links for those in the video description. Thank you to my patrons. I had fun doing a read along with you, and I look forward to the next one. I'll put a link to my Patreon and Instagram in the description, and happy reading. Bye.